my opinion, I'd say programmatic or digitization basically has the power to make any channel better. Can you, from in order, we'll change up the order a bit. I think, Brina, we'll give you a break because you're a Digi-only channel. We'll go back to you, Brad. Can you talk a little bit about what programmatic or digitization has done to make the channel better, more powerful for agencies and clients?
For sure. So we're probably the oldest medium on the planet, probably the last one to get into programmatic out of home. So obviously, very traditional medium, outdoor billboards posted for 28-day lunar periods in Australia. But recently, technology has allowed it to start trading programmatically. So that's connecting to SSPs and DSPs and allowing automation to play a role in how people are sort of activating campaigns. So I think, the technology, what it brings to out of home is probably the fact that you're allowed to buy in at lower entry rates. There's a lower buy-in, and you can access through some of the best DSPs in the world. Both DSPs up here are actually connected to JCDecaux inventory here in Australia. So quick plug for you guys. And I think that omni-channel conversation, is really interesting because, as you all know, we spend so much time out of home each and every day. So you're able to connect on many of journeys into work or back home. And I think that's really important to start to think about that journey from an omni-channel perspective. And with that comes the fact that we get different people looking at such an old channel. So we've got some of the sharpest digital minds, some of the sharpest programmatic minds working it out of home now. And it's a really, really exciting space at the moment.
Steve, you want to go next?
Yeah, so from an audio point of view, we share a lot of similarities with the out-of-home programmatic offering because we were quite late to the party as well. And I think if we talk about audio as an industry in general, we've kind of bucked the trend as a linear channel, not losing audience as digitalization and fragmentation of audience has happened. The linear broadcast channel is still very much alive and well. In 2023, there's actually more people listening to broadcast radio than there was 6 years ago. So that's kind of held pretty well. But the explosion of audiences in digital has been the fragmentation of radio, but also the new content consumption within podcasting. Like, I'm sure everybody here has listened to a podcast or continues listening to podcasts across their day and when they're commuting and so on. And it's that kind of explosion of audience in that digital channel that's really led to the programmatic growth across the industry. Now, with that opportunity does come a bit of risk, and I guess across the audio channel in Australia, there's now 8 different podcast publishers that will come and try and take your money for some digital advertising at one point in time. Now, with 8 different publishers, that's a lot of people to talk to. The beauty of programmatic is you can make that more efficient by creating one campaign, adding every single inventory source in, and then let the technology do the work and find the right audience at the right time on the right device to reach that audience. So I think that's where the digitalization for audio has come to the fore in Australia.
Yeah, when you think about the TV, it's the main focus point of any household, right? Think about mass scale, mass reach, and I guess with programmatic and the digitalization of it, it's about giving that addressability of audience as well. So you can target by demographic, by audience behaviors and profile as well. And when you just think about CTV, it's a connected device in the household, but the way the consumers are adopting media, and I think about my kids, what they do is watch, apps on a TV or a mobile device. It's going to grow further and further as well, and how they're going to consume the media. So from a programmatic perspective, efficient buying, and also providing that return on ad spend for brands and advertisers.
Yeah, great. And I think that we've got obviously VOZ for kind of planning and post now. But Steve, from you, a little bit more about how you'd say, with what we've got at the moment for audio and radio, how's it best to be for everybody out here to be kind of planning and buying and measuring the channel together, both programmatically and more traditionally purchased radio?
Yeah, and like I said, the audience hasn't moved from broadcast. It's just kind of fragmented across different devices. And I think when you plan and buy, whether you want to call it radio, audio, however you want to kind of label it now, I think you have to start with the audience you're trying to reach. What's the consumer doing? Because from an industry, we'll talk about radio, DAB, streaming, podcasting. From a consumer point of view, if they listen to radio in the car on FM, or if they're at home listening through a smart speaker, or they're on the bus listening through their mobile device, they don't care. If they're listening to Nova Entertainment, they're listening to Fitzy and Whipper in the morning, They're just listening to the radio. That's what they're doing. They're consuming that content. So from a planning and buying point of view, we need to think of it in the same way. And just how do you maximize your audience who are consuming that content at the time you want them to reach? Do you want to reach them? We've done a bit of work at Nova where we've produced what we call an optimized spend plan, because what we want to do is find out where our deduplicated audience is across all of those touch points. So then when you brief us, we can show you the best and most effective way, and normally a cheaper way, to maximize that audience reach. Next time you brief us, just ask about the optimized spend plan and we'll come back to you with a more effective reach buy.
Right, and Brina, so you're representing a digital-only channel, and probably for most people out here, probably the channel up here that people know the least about. Do you want to talk a little bit more about in-game advertising and why people might be wanting to be planning and buying it for their clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, something that everyone here touched on is the consideration journey for the consumer. And I think that's where all of these channels are quite complementary of each other. But to kind of warm up the audience with in-game, how many people here, show of hands, have ever played a video game before, currently play video games, or have a gaming app on their phone?
Couple man up, so.
Amazing. So that's the majority of us, right? And how many are going to be playing Pac-Man later? Trick question, all of us. But really the power of in-game and what in-game is. So in-game, also known as blended in-game or intrinsic in-game, is a non-disruptive, non-clickable ad that is actually delivered within the gaming environment. So think of when you are playing a game through Xbox, PlayStation, Candy Crush as an example. These ads are delivered within that gaming environment and they are non-disruptive. Now, the power behind in-game and why in-game is new, and actually there was an ad news article released earlier this year talking about the rise of in-game and how untapped this market or this channel really is, are three core pillars behind it. So the first one being the fact that it is massively untapped. There are 3.1 billion gamers worldwide. And fun fact, 75% of those gamers are actually from this part of the world, right? So APAC, Australia included in that, meaning reaching an audience through a different consideration journey, super impactful. The second one being that when these ads are delivered within that gaming environment, they are non-disruptive. So it doesn't actually annoy the user while they are focused in game. And the third being that you can get creative with it. So, we had a panel earlier about creating and content, and I think that's really important when you are considering diversifying in a new channel, is what message do you want to deliver in that moment in time when that user is hyper-focused in that game.
Great, and good lead on into measurement. I think particularly about what is new in measurement for your channel since the digitization or programmatic or omni-channel planning and buying and post-analysis. And you've got the mic still, so why don't you keep going?
Awesome. I was actually surprised by this as well, and attention has been a core subject, at least at StackAdapt and measurement in general. But within in-game, we can actually measure two different components of attention. So the first one is we can measure how many times the users actually viewed the ad within the game. And then the second is how long that user actually spent looking at that ad within the game. Now, I know I said earlier it's non-disruptive, users are hyper-focused, but that's where the creativity behind the brand and the messaging comes into play. And we can do this through pixel implementation, through attention measurement partners such as Lumen and Adelaide. And what we can derive from this is are we reaching the right audience? So if users are watching our ads, hopefully we are reaching the right target audience. And two, how creative are we getting with our messaging? Essentially, the more the user is viewing the ad, hopefully the better the messaging is relating to the user. So.
Right, CCB?
Yeah, thank you. Above and beyond the standard hygiene metrics of your view-through rates, completion rates, high attention time and dwell time. I know from a TV manufacturer perspective, ACR, automated content recognition, whereas based on opted-in consented data, allows you to drop a pixel on your CTV, and that actually understands what is that consumer watching on that CTV. So you can understand audience behaviors based on the content they're consuming, but also who's consuming that content as well. So that goes back into that targeting as well. Here at Bliss, with our expertise in location, understanding human movement and behavior, from our measurement perspective, it's also about shifting the business outcomes, which you mentioned in the previous panel as well. So based on control and exposed locations and areas, have we shifted an uplift in footfall into particular locations and stores, or have we shifted an uplift in sales as well? So here at Bliss, we can measure uplift in business outcomes with CTV offering as well.
Yeah, great. I think ACR, I'm a big fan. It's great data. Is there any more that you can kind of say for people for how they can access it, how they could be using it for planning and buying both of CTV and maybe some other channels? And the answer can't be to call you.
Yes.
So how can people use that ACR data?
Yeah, but based on your partnership markets, and also understanding the audience data that you can get from ACR as well. It allows you to actually ingest that data into your planning cycle as well, so you can understand, based on your audience demographic profile, what sort of content you can actually target to those. So
yeah, great. Steve, do you want
to? From a measurement point of view, like the audio industry has made the digital audio industry has made great advancements forward in measurement. I think in previous years, it's been kind of cited as a barrier to entry for buyers and agencies. And I think kind of that narrative needs to go away, because I think it's a little unfair now. There's plenty of technologies, there's plenty of ways that we can identify audiences that we're reaching and then identify the action they've taken after being exposed to an ad. I think if you look around the world for podcasting, in the States and across Europe, they're now using podcasting as a performance channel because of the action that's been taken off of the back of hearing or being exposed to an ad and the attribution that they can attach to that. And that technology is available in Australia. So at Nova, we're playing around with a performance-led product for podcasting where you buy an action and you don't buy on a CPM. And across, I guess, if we look across the wider audio industry and radio, the advancements that the CRA and GfK have done with Radio 360 to understand who's listening, where they're listening, how they're listening. There's measurement all over the place in audio now, and I think kind of the bad rap that it used to get isn't there anymore. So I think we're in a good spot.
You're great. Home, Brad?
Yeah, we're very similar. Steve and I have been having some beers recently as emerging channels beers. We've been catching up and sharing war stories, but very similar because, it's always been a traditional channel. It's always been a bit tricky to measure from a brand effectiveness piece. You're paying $100K for a Kantar study or something ridiculous, but the programmatic advantage has allowed you to put, a CPM premium onto your buy. You can get footfall attribution, you can get website attribution, and you can run some simple sort of brand metrics pieces as well. So the accessibility has come to the fore because of programmatic trading and the fact that we're trying to get out of home traded in the same way that all the digital channels are traded, be it in impressions, be it with attribution and those kind of things. So there's so many opportunities. Quick plug for a project that we've been working on over the last sort of 12 months is that everyone's always asked, I've been at JCGO for nearly 4 years and I've always asked for proof. Like, why should we do it? How do you prove the effectiveness? So we actually put our money where our mouth is, and we measured basically 15 campaigns last year, and we're about a month away from releasing the white paper with 15 brands going into how they've proven the effectiveness of out of home. So if you do, watch our webinar, you do get the white paper, you'll see all the different options across programmatic out of home, and there's quite a lot. And some of the omnichannel DSPs do some really interesting stuff that you potentially don't know was actually possible.
It's interesting to be able to trade out of home like your digital channels, but it's really different. I think it's the only channel where the device is not owned by a human or a household, which makes it a bit more challenging for you guys. And it isn't really about that last exposure. So can you talk a little bit more about how you're measuring things like footfall and website traffic, knowing that the power of out of home traditionally has been about high reaching, high frequency, not one exposure on a mobile device and then an action takes place?
Yeah, I think it's trying to change those perceptions, right? But I think out of home is such a loved channel, and there's so many people probably in this room that love buying out of home, and to walk in there and tell them to do something completely differently, it hasn't landed in a lot of sort of agency groups. But I think once you sort of realize that it's not relevant for all the clients, I don't talk to JCDecau's, top 30, top 40 big brand spenders. They can afford to do the big broadcast campaigns. we're looking at those kind of medium to sort of longer tail advertisers and allowing them to buy into assets that they've never been able to buy in before. And it's so relevant for this room, to be completely honest. So I think moving sort of some of the, if the objectives are, tactical, they want to apply data, they don't have a huge budget, they want to be active around the Taylor Swift concert, or they want like an always-on strategy where they've got attribution filtering into their same sort of other digital channels that they're measuring, like that's when we're starting to talk programmatic. But if a client comes to us and says, we've got 14 plus reach, we've got, 300 grand for awareness, we just want reach and awareness, that's when we roll in straight to the sales team to run a traditional campaign. So it's understanding the objectives and then sort of going from there to then give the recommendation. In terms of the actual measurement, the providers, what they do is they grab the exposed device IDs down to the time of play within a certain geo fence around that asset. So, if you were walking past a small format asset, on the streets down at Coogee, they can pull together your device IDs and then do analysis off the back of that to understand whether you've been to a website, if there's been a pixel drop down, or whether you've walked into certain sort of locations. So it's all around a lot of the device IDs for that attribution piece.
Yeah, great. And probably a good lead into the next question, which is around data, and a two-parter. So firstly, what kind of data does your channel now produce, which is making it even more powerful basically for the channel? But secondly as well, to kind of help in your argument of being the ultimate programmatic channel, what data does it produce so that other channels can utilize that data to seamlessly bring the whole campaign together? Because let's be honest, I think having a one-channel media plan is about as rare as turning up for an event and Sam not being there. So, Steve, do you want to kick that one off? Touche, Mr. Buchanan.
Good return serve there, Rob. So I guess from a digital audio point of view, again, we've got quite a unique channel that we have a distribution strategy of our content that is send it to where the listeners are, send it to where the speakers are. So we kind of put all of our content in what we call the open internet, right? So we're not behind a walled garden. You don't have to sign in to kind of get access to our content. We make it available, and that distribution strategy, I think you can see by the growth of digital audio has kind of yielded fruit in terms of the audiences we've collected. So in terms of, to your point around play, kind of how does it work on a media plan with other channels? So audio plays well with a lot of other channels, and it's because that open internet approach to content allows us to not necessarily create different data points, but it allows us to work with different data companies. So we talked about ACR and connected TVs. So we can now, because of the way our content's distributed, we can now use ACR data down to a geo level to increase the reach and frequency on top of your TV campaign. We can use location data to work closely with our home to ensure we're adding the audio to that visual element of your media plan. So I guess audio's superpower is not kind of the data it produces, but it's the data that's already out there that we can bring in and kind of weaponize and work collaboratively with everything else that's on your media plan.
Whoever wants to go next.
It's even though I'm representing Connected TV, I do work for Omni DSP, so I do recommend an omni-channel solution is the way to go, because you do drive that ROI. It's been researched where if you got two mediums, a 20% uplift in ROI. If you add a third channel, there's over 30% ROI as well. So, but from a Connected TV perspective, all that data reach that comes from ACR, how you can curate your content and target specific audiences based on that data set that you have, and also manage your reach and frequency. But how you can combine that audience and extend it across the media mix of a campaign as well, which is important. So, Brina?
Yeah. Awesome. I think, echoing what Steve and Elias said, and Brad, hopefully, it's not just about one channel. It's, I think, as we talked about earlier, about mixing in some of the other channels to provide a holistic strategy to your clients. And I think where we come into play with in-game specifically and how that complements CTV and audio and out of home is looking at how it affects cross-device. So at StackAdapt, we have our own identity graph where we use deterministic and probabilistic data to cross-match graph users. And through this, our business intelligence team, they're much smarter than I am, conducted a study where we ran a few in-game campaigns alongside some other standard channels to try to really understand the ad effectiveness of these campaigns and really how in-game actually complements the overall strategy. And what we found was 11% lift in new devices and a 6% lift in unique users. 80% of the overall audience was newly untapped from in-game as a channel, as being added into the mix. So although oftentimes we do consider it, that brand awareness play, which it definitely is, it definitely helps the full funnel mix once you consider the addition of other channels as well. And then, of course, on top of that, if you want to even get more granular with segmentation, you can layer on third-party audiences. To your question earlier, what additional audiences and segmentations can we do with each channel? With in-game, you can get as granular as possible, but because it's so untapped and there's such a diverse audience that you can go after, it's definitely a channel that I would recommend using to grab that incremental reach.
Yeah, right, great. So, great result. So, for people out there, you're saying it's really untapped. So there's probably a lot of people sitting out here right now who haven't never done in-game advertising. Again, the answer can't be call me. Where's a good place for them to start if they want to get their client on board with potentially testing and learning in the environment?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is, working with independent agencies myself, I find there's a lot more flexibility to be creative around the messaging and how we can pivot the actual creative we want to serve within the actual channel itself. So where I would first start is trying to understand what audience am I trying to reach, right? And you may not know the entirety of the audience you're trying to reach, but getting a good understanding of what's the holistic objective with this brand and what are the in-quarter or in-IO campaign objectives right now, and how is this channel and these results that I'm seeing now going to actually impact that holistic strategy as well. So that's where I would definitely start first.
Yeah, great. Brad, I think you're the only one left on this one.
Yeah, so we have absolutely no reliance on cookies, which we're very happy about. But out of home is obviously location-based, right? So it's kind of the combination of a few platforms. If we look at our proprietary planning tool, you've got Move, which is the industry standard measurement system, which is about to have the biggest upgrade. It's due relatively soon, but it's about to have the biggest upgrade that it's had in the last 14 years, and it will be transformative for the industry. It'll be transformative for programmatic out of home as well. So that'll come into play soon, but then we also overlay other sort of postcode geographical data like ABS, Nielsen, and we're really understanding, the demographics of those people in the areas that they live. But then we need to understand, okay, where do they go? How do they move about? And that's when we put in mobile device data. So we actually start to look at journeys and we start to understand, where they're moving about through, their everyday. And then we then wash that out with Experian data to give our advertisers, access to 1,400 different segments, which again is not cookie-based data. So, as we move through this phase, and obviously Google have delayed the cookie deprecation, but out of home in a really strong place because everything that we've built isn't relied on that third-party cookie tracking, and it's relied a lot on just sort of geographical sort of postcodes as well.
Yeah, great. So generally when we're looking at the funnel, I'm a big believer in say it probably about 3 times a week. Just because we can doesn't mean we should, and a lot of over-targeting or trying to attribute when it can be a little bit tenuous. With the with programmatic coming into the channel or for gaming in general, where does the channel play best in the funnel, and where has programmatic now allowed the channel to play in a different layers of the funnel? I think it'd be good to hear about what you think about that, and also some of the pitfalls that you've seen probably Hobcos got fall into and done it wrong to start with as they were kind of learning. It'd be really good to hear all of that from you guys. You want to go first?
Yeah. I think, as you know, with TV being mass reach and high awareness, they're feeding the top of the funnel with your key brand KPI metrics. Now with the addressability of programmatic, and connected TV, you can get lower down the funnel as well. I think some of the, issues we've had in the past working with Holcos, depending, they're putting too much of a performance metric on a CTV campaign, which you got to bring it back to, key brand KPIs. Here at Bliss, we do a few things where we measure brand KPIs, but also measure whether we've shifted business outcomes as well. So whether that CTV and probably the same sort of point Jay said occur, we use Geo as a basis in regards to whether we've driven an uplift into particular store locations. It also can be providing a performance metric, but a key business outcome, so which is objective of that key brief as well.
Yeah, great. Steve, you want to go next?
I think audio always been an awareness channel, right? So radio back in the day, you build your RNS. I think the digitalization has helped us come down the funnel. But I think one of the pitfalls is everyone keeps going down the funnel. So if everything on your media plan is down the bottom of the funnel, you're not going to fill the top of it and you're going to run out of customers. So I think audio can play a role in every stage of the funnel. Like radio has been used for kind of a DR and kind of driving action. Spoke earlier about podcasts being used in other markets as a pure performance channel. We've got kind of radio streaming and music streaming that can be used as kind of to drive footfall and people into store. I think I always start with the consumer. What do you want the consumer to do, and what's the role of channel on the plan? And if you're, as we were speaking about earlier, we don't look at the media plans in isolations. Like, what is audio doing? It's like we need to look at the whole plan. Where do we fit in? What's our role? And then what do you want the consumer to do? The people that hear your ad, what do you want? What's the action you want them to take? Do you just want them to be aware of something? Do you want them to kind of research something? Do you want them to go somewhere? Do you want them to buy something? Which is obviously the ultimate goal. But I think one of the pitfalls that we do is we do all of this work on our media planning to buy the space. And then when we get to the creative, we just slap the radio ad on everything. And that's kind of the biggest pitfall I think we do when we're talking about the journey down the funnel or whatever we're doing. There's so much. We're talking kind of digital and programmatic, then we're talking AI all day, so we might as well continue down that vein. But there's so much technology now where you can change the creative on the fly based on anything that comes through the ad call. So it can be location, time of day, the show you're watching, the host. You can even kind of get AI now to clone people's voices, which is pretty bloody scary. But yeah, I think kind of to talk about the funnel, it's a full funnel approach audio now. We just need to understand what our role is on your plan and what you want the consumer to do for that campaign.
You go next, Brad.
Well, you want dirt on the whole codes?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll give one example. Very early days, there was a footfall attribution study did for a product that was getting sold in a Bunnings. So they wanted to understand the footfall driven into a Bunnings. And last time I went to Bunnings, there was about 10,500 different products available. So I don't think they got very good insights into people going to store to buy that specific product. So I think that's kind of the challenge. I think out of home has always been really high in the awareness piece. And like Steve, I think we're getting a little bit closer, middle of the funnel. But I think we're quite open and honest with the fact that we're really a priming channel, right? There's so many opportunities for you to, drive awareness as people are going about their everyday movements, and then you're retargeting them. You're pulling together those device IDs, and you're retargeting them as they go home, or when they're in an in-game app, or when they're watching CTV. And I think no one's really cracked that yet, right? They haven't actually, really driven that omni-channel strategy through, including out of home, because in reality, 80% of Australians leave the house every day. 20 million people leave their house every day. And they're likely to go past some of the out-of-home assets that are available in Australia, and a lot of them are available programmatically and through omni-channel DSPs, but people aren't quite connecting all the dots together, and I think that's probably the really massive opportunity that's on the table.
How are you managing to, or is it kind of out of your control now that when the out-of-home has been bought programmatically, stopping people kind of using the channel incorrectly, like you're saying there, buying small budgets over a huge amount of panels, and then trying to attribute the last hit to a footfall or a web? Can you control that, or is that kind of out of your control a little bit now? It's programmatic.
I think that's probably a DSP question. Like, they can probably start to look at device IDs that are going, past different assets and pooling them together and working out, whether they've kind of, had different levels of frequency or they've been impacted multiple times. I've seen a few measurement pieces like that.
Yeah.
Has it scaled? Not yet, because I think, the technology is kind of in its infancy. I think the more advertisers spend within the channel, the more those DSPs are going to spend on their tech platform. So it's kind of chicken and egg a little bit. Frequency is a bit of a tricky one, but it's not necessarily, the programmatic out of home is not necessarily a high frequency buy. That's what traditional's always been to buy. You'll buy City of Melbourne, you buy a pack of 50, 60 assets in the City of Melbourne. You expect to see it on every second corner because you've bought 15% share of time. Programmatic's not being bought in that way. You're not looking to flood the market. You're looking to hit, it's a really nice 1+ reach driver, and that's what we've seen from the analysis that we've done with a lot of campaigns based on those device IDs, is that it's a really nice 1+ reach builder. But yeah, getting away from perceptions of I'm expecting this share of time, I'm expecting to go and get a pop, I'm expecting to go and get out there. That's just a natural part of moving into this space, because there's already preconceptions that are there from years of trading out of home.
And agencies and clients should be used to that from buying other media programmatically by now, but yeah, they still ask for a pop. You just mock them up anyway, don't you? When was the last time you took a photograph?
Beautiful mocks. Beautiful mocks, yeah.
In-game?
Yeah, I think going back to what Steve said as well earlier, a lot of the time the focus is on lower funnel tactics, right? So the more focus we have on lower funnel, the less focus we have on, customer acquisition at the top, or even looking at tapping into new audiences and, continuing that top to bottom strategy. So I think where in-game really comes in, as mentioned earlier, is, the acquisition of new customers, but also all the channels that, we're talking about today are quite complementary of each other throughout the consumer consideration journey. So, you might want to leverage digital out of home when a user is outside, and you might want to leverage CTV or in-game when a user's inside, and audio as well for both. So it really just depends on the holistic strategy that the brand's looking for, and which channel is going to get you those in-quarter KPIs as well.
All right, great. So we'll just start the wrap up now. So in 30 seconds or less, your final pitch. We'll start from the other end this time, Brad. We'll start with you. Why is your channel the ultimate programmatic channel on this panel?
Yeah, for sure. Good. Thanks for starting with me. Programmatic out of home, obviously, one of the oldest channels, now more accessible than ever before. You've got the measurement that you've been requesting. You're connected to some of the biggest DSPs on the planet. It's at a lower buy-in rate than what you've ever had, and we're avoiding cookies. So there's some really great opportunities for out of home moving forward.
Great. Audio?
Yeah, for audio, as I said earlier, we share very similar challenges and opportunities across audio and out of home. Audio, we don't use cookies either, so it's all pretty much IP based when we do targeting. I think the beauty of audio now is that audio is everywhere. So people from mobile devices, on the train, at home, it's inside, outside, as we were just talking about, and it's a full funnel approach from all of the different platforms we have, from broadcast radio to music streaming to podcasting. It's kind of from music to spoken word. You can kind of reach audiences across every part of the day, no matter what they're choosing to consume. And the audience growth, the double-digit audience growth year on year for the last 4 years has pretty much shown that.
Yeah, and similar to in-game is device ID and IP driven mainly, right? So in terms of PII, that's definitely a channel to consider for those reasons as well. But also bringing back a stat that I talked about earlier, 75% of the world's gamers are actually located in this region. So it is definitely an untapped market, especially in this part of the world.
CTV?
Yeah, and I think Sam presented those slides before. We showed that CTV was the highest growing. But from a CTV perspective, it's mass scale, mass reach, and now with the addressability of programmatic solutions, you can really target your audience as well. When you think about CTV being the focal point of any household, that's one element. But when you think about how people are consuming content, now it's OTT, and you've got all these acronyms like SVOD, BVOD, AVOD. It really opens up your world in regards to target audiences based on CTV. So,
yeah, awesome. So I think to wrap up, and before we go into questions, I think we've kind of established there is one. You can all work together better now, though, and data and platforms and omni-channel planning and post-analysis is really here for all the channels we've had. I hope you guys have all learned something from the panel today, unless we've got any questions. Cool. Oh, here we go. Oh, wait.
So if I were with a media like all what your party practice, they that verify different ways that every individual can they from the version what
I think if we had the answer to that, I would be in Barbados on a yacht, loaded. But I might throw over to the DSPs because they might have a bit more of an answer.
So in terms of tracking across an omni-channel solution, yeah, I think with measurement, that's a huge piece for us coming out this year in regards to how we can, whether we've reached your audience, whether we've shifted the needle in your brand as well, from a tracking perspective, and whether we've shifted business outcomes, we bring it back to a geolocation area and we measure control and exposed areas, and whether we've shifted business outcomes based on those areas compared to the exposed. So I think from a third-party tracking perspective, we work with all the major partners in this market like IAS, Moat, Nielsen in regards to understanding, all the ads are verified. I know Bliss is also big on sustainability as well, so ensuring that we are hitting our benchmarks in regards to that. But from a end of the day, it's about hitting your business outcomes.
So I can touch on it as well a little bit from a DSP perspective. So when you're buying in silo or going direct, a lot of the times it's hard to attribute all of that data aggregated potentially in a reporting platform. When you are buying it under one roof, it is all housed under one roof, right? And then layering on some of the, like I mentioned earlier, we have our own identity graph. So, how does a display campaign affect my native campaign, affect my CTV campaign, affect my in-game campaign? That can be done. But to do that, you do need to go under one roof, essentially. If you do find a tracking platform for all four in silo, do let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any more questions?
what I don't know that it I don't
There isn't a huge scale issue. I think that's a misconception. So I won't talk with an industry hat on. Most providers have at least 5% share of time dedicated to programmatic at all times. I would average that the fill rate right now on that is probably 20%. So there's still 80% that is unfilled of all the bid requests that get sent out each and every day. So it's in its infant stages. And I think one of the issues is there's no point JCDecaux putting 10%, 15% in if our fill rate isn't where it needs to be now. Ours is a bit higher than the 20% mark, which is good. But some of the other media owners haven't seen that. So I think it's tricky, right? When, sometimes, the supply issue kind of comes up. So, we're doing a lot from an industry perspective. Like definitely there was some stragglers, I'm not going to point any fingers, but there was some absolute stragglers out there. But we're all, kumbaya at the moment, and we're all out there, having, industry events and talking together. We're running in-agency councils, we're running panels, we're doing all sorts of stuff because the supply's there, the opportunities are there, but the education's still behind across the agencies. So the supply perceptions kind of aren't there at all. The supply perceptions are there, but we're trying to eradicate them because it's not really a thing anymore. It was, but it's just not anymore.
I think it's different to all the other channels as well, right? So when you've got like CTV coming on board with BVOD, the consumer take-up was growing as the agencies were catching up, right? So the consumer take-up was scale. It's not the same for out-of-home, right? The panels are in the ground. They're showing ads to people. So we were not waiting for consumer take-up of out-of-home because it's the same thing. It's just executed differently. So I think it is different for the out-of-home guys in so many ways. It's a lot more challenging for them, especially with the location versus ownership, which I think adds more challenge.
my president talked about like a multi-channel of the book, a various and IP, how we in these different segments compete to each other. I'd love to know like segment, wait, data sharing.
Let's go first on that one.
You get
No, great question. At Bliss, we measure the audience and not the channel. So it's about us building out an audience, understanding the brief, building out the audience, and where can we reach that audience? So whether that's across CTV, across home, we work through View, where it's display, or even digital audio as well. So I think it's about measuring in the audience. And the second part to your question was around sharing data. When you speak to our CTO, it does limit scale and what data do we share. And also being headquartered out of London, we are GDPR compliant. And being at the IAB Data Summit last week, we're going to have a big take on our privacy regulation coming out at the end of the year. So what data can we share and have the consumers opted and consented? The challenge is, I know there's a lot of talk about data clean rooms. There's a lot of talk about these becoming bigger walled gardens, but is that going to impact scale? I'm not sure how that's going to pan out, but I know there's a lot of talk about data clean rooms and the sharing of data. But one way to get around any privacy regulation is don't share your data in the first place. So at Bliss, we're using our technology where we don't need any personal identifiers such as cookies or device IDs to activate. So our currency is the geo, is postcode, and at that postcode level, that's where we aggregate with the likes of MasterCard to understand spending behavior and Roy Morgan for intent. And we don't need any device IDs to activate or cookies. So hopefully that answered your question. Might have butchered it a little bit, but...
Does anybody else want to?
Yeah, I think in terms of data sharing, maybe, where we're trying to get at is how are partners working with each other and sharing their own data in relation to how, if it's executed on one platform or another, how it differentiates. And then from a brand's perspective, how you can actually onboard your own data as well. So I think the future for data sharing would be first-party data, right? Being able to onboard your brand's first-party data into a platform, but also, we work with Nova, we work with JC2Co as well. So being able to, have a synergy with our partners and say, our clients are looking for this. How can we segment the buy to align with what our clients are looking for, but also give our clients the ability to actually onboard their own first-party data and actually layer that and learn from it. Where I think data sharing is going to get tricky is monetization. So ownership and control of that data, right? But, I think we're in this ecosystem, everyone's got a part to play as well. So at the end of the day, the brands are going to be the ones controlling that.
I think when you talk about data sharing as well, I think careful what you wish for. So there's, we in the media industry, when we're planning a buy and we'd love to share data, we'd love to put this here, but then you get to the actual client and the brand and we're like, can we share data? Like, absolutely not. And with all of the privacy legislation that's coming through, it's only going to get harder and harder and harder. To echo a point that Brad made earlier is, I think instead of data sharing, we've got to get better at universal identifiers that DSPs and the technology can use to essentially use all of the individual's data without it moving and identify people as they move across the internet. To Brad's point, that takes time, that takes investment. So for that to happen in individual channels, those individual channels that are emerging that the audience are moving towards needs investment for then the tech companies to start thinking with their wallets and start building those identifiers and building that tech platform for us. So I think we'll see less and less data movement, and I think we'll see more and more identifiers to try and tie all that together in a safer way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think from an agency point of view, it's kind of your role, right? You've got to have a data strategy for the buy, and that might be dependent. It might be that you want to use location data that you take from your out-of-home buy. It might be that you want to use your ACR data to power your TV and then collect that data and then utilize that to upweight and optimize your programmatic out of home. I think that kind of the power of that sits in the agencies, and the challenge for us as indies is that the whole coast have got huge clean rooms of their own. They're building their own, and that it's really cost prohibitive to us. So we're going to be relying on third parties more, DSPs more, and I think some of the media owners, and it can vary on brief to brief at the moment, rather than having one solution that's God knows how much Group M is spending on it, right? It's one solution that they're using and rolling out across their entire client portfolio. It's not really the same for us. We're going to be a bit more nimble, brief by brief. Got to get in on that, Brad? Good, you're in.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.